And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week.
It's Holy Saturday, and for those of us of the Christian faith, we're almost through our walk with our Lord through his passion and death, and tomorrow, his glorious resurrection. The most wonderful time of the year for Christians, the most sacred time right now as we come to the end of Holy Week. I'm always reminded of a story that goes back a number of years now where a member of the media, I would say a pretty left-wing member of the media, but that would be redundant, sent me a note on Easter Sunday that simply said, "He is risen!" exclamation point. And from that day forward, I've been tied to that person in ways I kind of can't even explain. But I realized then and there, what I probably realized before but hadn't really sunk in, that all the other stuff isn't really what matters. It's important and we should fight for it, but what really matters is that he is risen. The three most important words in history. And so, as we prepare to celebrate the resurrection of our Lord, I just want to say to everyone, a happy and blessed Easter and a wonderful day and time to each of you. Robert F. Kennedy makes his pick for vice president. He's required to do that in many states in order to be on the ballot, so he had to make his selection much earlier than a major party candidate would ordinarily make theirs. If you look back in history, the two major third-party candidates in the last half a century, George Wallace in 1968 and Ross Perot in 1992, made interesting picks for vice president, both of which hurt them because ordinarily a vice presidential candidate doesn't have much impact on the top of the ticket, but they can from time to time hurt the top of the ticket. Think Thomas Eagleton in 1972. But George Wallace picked General Curtis Boom Boom LeMay, and Ross Perot picked Admiral Stockdale, James Stockdale, a Medal of Honor recipient who sadly went on to the debate stage and said, "Who am I? Why am I here?" and really hurt the top of the ticket by so doing. A brilliant guy who otherwise would have been a stellar candidate for a lot of things, but wasn't ready for the prime time of presidential politics. Curtis LeMay, as George Wallace was announcing his candidacy, thought it might be a good idea to drop nuclear bombs on North Vietnam. That didn't go over real well either. And the Wallace candidacy not only stumbled, it really cratered at that point, although he still managed to carry several states and 46 electoral votes. He got one from North Carolina that should have been Nixon's, but he actually was the last third-party candidate to get electoral votes. Robert Kennedy's pick of Nicole Shanahan is an interesting one, though, because she's got a lot of bucks. She's probably a billionaire based upon her divorce some years ago, and her politics are very interesting. 4 years ago, she managed to support Pete Buttigieg, that nutty woman, what's her name, Williamson, and then Joe Biden, all in one election cycle for president. She says she's a progressive. So Robert Kennedy's candidacy is kind of tilting towards looking for votes from the left rather than from the right, because there was an open question about whether he would draw more votes from Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But it's pretty clear now that the Democrats are worried to death that he's going to draw more votes from Joe Biden than from Donald Trump. And so they are, guess what, trying to block his ballot access. The people that want democracy saved are the ones that want to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, maybe keep Robert F. Kennedy off the ballot. You know, they do have ballots in some countries where there's only one candidate on it. That's what some of our friends on the progressive left seem to want. But as hard as the left twists their bowels into a tizzy, Donald Trump continues to win victories. The polls continue to show him moving up and up and up. And this week he wins some legal battles in New York, where the bond there was dramatically reduced, still, in my judgment, way more than it should be, when you think about the fact that Bernie Madoff, in a criminal matter, had a $10 million bond. Donald Trump gets a $500 million or nearly $500 million bond set in a civil matter by Letitia James, who was out there telling the world that she was going to get that guy. The whole thing stinks to high heavens, but at least now it's gotten back somewhere into reality ranch, and Trump seems he's going to be paying that and taking the appeal, which was what was required in order for him to do so. And Trump wins big in the markets this week with his IPO of Truth Social. He picked up an additional several $billion of net worth. that's going to carry him a long way. Now, of course, that's restricted stock. He won't be able to do much with it for 6 months, but 6 months is not that far away. And he has to be smiling all the way to the bank, and entrepreneurial-minded folks everywhere are applauding what he did. And voters in my home state of Pennsylvania win big this week when the Third Circuit Court of Appeals says, yes, you have to fill out that mail-in ballot properly in order for it to be counted. Lower court said, oh no, you don't have to have the date on the outside of the envelope. The Third Circuit Court said, yes, you do. That may have very significant implications. And as you think back, of course, over the past few months, I've been talking a little bit about college tuitions and how out of hand they are, and how these gigantic academic institutions with billion-dollar endowments don't help students out with tuition. You know, we've got all this debt forgiveness nonsense coming out of the Biden administration, but why don't we require some of these institutions of higher learning with these gigantic endowments to pay at least a portion of that? They invest that money at an expected return of 7%. And if the market is as it is going currently, they're making a lot more than 7%. So you can see that there would be a gigantic amount of cash available to actually help students with tuition. But this past month or so, and I really meant to talk about it at the time, but I missed it. Mrs. Gottesman, I think her name is Janet Gottesman, the wife of David Gottesman, who was a protege of Warren Buffett's, left a medical school, Einstein Medical School in New York, $1 billion. Think about that, $1 billion. She didn't want a building named after her, or the school named after her, or anything else. She wanted to use it for tuition for those students there, many of whom were graduating with $250,000 in debt. And if you saw the press conference where she announced it, and the students there and the joy that they had, you just have to take a moment to mention her and her legacy. Really one that we all should celebrate, because it wasn't all about her, it was all about them. And she had said, my husband left me some Berkshire Hathaway stock. If you see what it's valued at, the A stock these days, there was a lot of it. She got $1 billion to those students. And as we usually do, we end on a little bit of a somber note by noting the passing of Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman, who passed away this week at the age of, I think, 92. Joe Lieberman was an incredible man, a truly great man, and one of the last moderate Democrats. He was the vice presidential nominee for the Democrats in 2000, running with Al Gore in what arguably was the closest election in American history. He would have been the first Jewish vice president of the United States. But what a lot of folks may not know is that he almost got back onto a ticket as a vice presidential nominee some years later. In 2008, John McCain, the Republican nominee, came very, very close to selecting Joe Lieberman. In fact, he wanted to do it, but folks within the party said he simply couldn't pick a Democrat to run on the Republican ticket. But Joe Lieberman will certainly be missed. And I should note that in his closing days, he was an incredibly articulate and outspoken spokesperson for Israel's war against the Hamas terrorists, something we should all be very grateful for. So may Joe Lieberman rest in peace. And baseball season begins, lots of smiles there, and March Madness continues, but most importantly, tomorrow is the glorious day of our Lord's resurrection. And so to all, a wonderful, happy, and blessed Easter.